Stage 16 and 17 of this year's Giro had some of the wildest team tactics that I've seen in a while. Let's take a look at what the fuck was going on. Of course, the general classification of this year's Giro is pretty interesting. With Pogačar dominating everyone, it's pretty clear that most teams don't really know how to ride. Now, stage 16 and 17 are quite a bit different on paper. Of course, stage 16 was shortened by a bit after bad weather. However, both stages end up with a mountaintop finish and should give plenty of opportunities for attackers. Especially because UAE and Pogačar have not been too keen on controlling every single stage. His gap in the general classification is simply too big to be worried about any other contender at this point. Which means that generally, his team kinda relaxes, and if there's an attacking group with too big of a lead, they'll just let him go. There's no one that can get near Pogačar anyway. Now what we will see though in stage 16 and 17 is that two teams, Movistar and DSM, take control of the peloton and try and control the stage. Let's take a look at really what was going on and why they were doing this. In stage 16, around the 90-kilometer mark, we can see 4 riders going on the attack. Important to note here is that Movistar was already riding at the front of the peloton, trying to control. With this being the GC standing, you have to think they're riding for a stage win. Their highest GC man is Rubio in place 9, and he's definitely expected to surpass Zana, who's not as good of a climber as he is. But then there's Romain Bardet and 1.5 minute difference, and behind him as well, Jan Hirt at another minute difference. So it's just not super realistic for Movistar to put a big time gap in the people either in front or behind him. Therefore, they must be riding for a stage win, right? Now, if you want to go for a stage win this Giro, you have to make sure that Pogačar is not too close to the leading group in the final kilometers of the stage. Because if he is, we all know what will happen. He will attack and he will win the stage. But if the time gap between the leading group and Pogačar's peloton is too big, there's a big chance he will just let it go and he will keep his legs still that day. So if you want to go for a stage win in this Giro, you need to make sure that you attack early and that you build quite a big time gap before the final climb starts. And this should be relatively doable considering UAE doesn't care about controlling all the individual stages. So if you're Movistar, you have to be ready for these kind of moves. You have to be able to follow Alaphilippe specifically, who you know will attack in this stage, because he does it every single day. And even then, if you've missed it, either close the gap again immediately or make the jump with one of your riders. And don't do what Movistar did here. Kind of control the race, but also let the attacking group get a lead of almost 2 minutes. Because now the gap is too big for one rider to just jump across, and now you will have to use your team to close the entire gap over a longer period of time. And as we head into the final section of this race, which basically is just 30 kilometers of climbing, we see that Alaphilippe has gone solo, with the peloton and Movistar controlling just 1 minute behind him. And then, with about 20 kilometers to go, just when the peloton catches 2 of the other attackers, Movistar with Pelayo Sanchez make their move. He goes on the attack, but strange enough, Movistar is also still pacing in the peloton behind them. Now initially, I thought they must be using Sanchez as some sort of a satellite rider. They will send him ahead, still ride at decent pace in the peloton, and eventually will make the jump with Rubio and then have Pelayo Sanchez still pace for him ahead of the peloton. But this is not what happens. We see here that Quintana is still pacing in front of Rubio in the peloton and they only have a 10-second lead on Pelayo Sanchez. Next we see Pelayo Sanchez looking behind him, waiting for the peloton to arrive, so he can once again take a pull at the front of the peloton, which makes zero sense to me. Why do you waste all that energy earlier if you were just gonna pace in front of the peloton anyway? You could have just stayed there and not waste all that energy. But things are just about to get crazier. We see Quintana's job is done here as he falls back on the right side of the screen as Pelayo Sanchez takes the front of the peloton. And actually, at this point, Bardet drops out of the peloton. So I'm thinking, hey, maybe Movistar had some intel, maybe they knew Bardet was weak, and now they will put a strong pace to put a big time gap into Bardet, hopefully. But Movistar had different plans. You can see Pelayo Sanchez look behind him here as he goes on the attack again. Rubio chills behind him, talks on the radio right now, and lets Pelayo Sanchez go solo. Alaphilippe is still 30 seconds ahead of this group, but most importantly, this man Tadej Pogačar is still in the peloton, and having him only 30 seconds behind the race leader with 14 kilometers to go means he's a big favorite for the win. And then, as if being punished for god-awful tactics, Pelayo Sanchez also has a mechanical issue. I believe his chain comes off, and he cannot continue his attack. Now don't get me wrong here, this would not have changed anything. Pogačar is about to launch his attack, and there's absolutely no chance he could have stayed ahead. And then the inevitable happens. Maika has done his job here, and Pogačar goes on the attack. He catches Pellizzari, pushes ahead of him, and eventually wins the race. Thank you Movistar, thank you for some really interesting tactics, as Pogačar gets his 5th victory of this year's Giro. And what makes things even more ridiculous is that halfway through this stage, Adam Blythe had an interview with Max Schiandri, sports director at Movistar. And he asked him about what Movistar's plans were for today.
And he was very quiet, a smile on his face. He was looking at me with a nice smile, but he wasn't giving anything away. I asked for which rider in the team they're riding for, and he still gave me nothing away today. So Movistar has a good eye on the stage. They look super motivated. They're riding on the front, as we know, but without any information being passed on and just a little smile, I think we can read into that today and say they really want the stage win. They're really motivated, and they really believe in their leader, whoever that might be today.
Yeah, whoever that might be today. Very interesting ride here by Movistar. But in the next stage, stage 17, we see another team also fucking up royally. And that team is DSM. We see pretty early in the race Romain Bardet trying to go for an attack. This is the exact situation. The peloton is only roughly 10 to 15 seconds behind them, but in front of them is a group of 2, including Steinhauser. Roughly 10 seconds in front of that group is the front of the race with Alaphilippe and Quintana. But then, for some reason, Bardet is saying here, you know what, forget about this chase. Even though they are only 10 seconds in front of us, we're not gonna close this gap. And only Damiano Caruso here is like, nah, I still want to catch those guys, let's go. The 2 attacking groups merge together as Caruso keeps chasing the front group, and he eventually reaches them as well. So it seems like there were plenty of chances here for Romain Bardet to join the attacking group of the day, which was the clear plan of DSM here today. They wanted to go for a stage win with Romain Bardet. Then how come he didn't make it into the front group even though he had so many chances? But things are about to get worse. Attila Valter here with Conchi also makes the jump to the leading group, as we see the group extend its lead to about 2.5 minutes. But then we see something that we've seen before. DSM riding at the front of the peloton. They managed to reduce the time gap to 40 seconds, and here thinking, okay, there's still over 60 kilometers to go. They clearly have a very strong team today. Maybe this can work. The only thing they have to do is attack with Bardet relatively soon. You don't want to wait too long, because if you attack too late and there's not that long to go, then Pogačar will just follow because he'll take the stage win for free. Whereas if you will attack from 60 kilometers out, I have a hard time believing Pogačar will follow that. But then DSM does this. This is somewhat of an attack by Kevin Vermarke with Bardet in his wheel, but Pogačar stays on the wheel here as well. This is just not an all-out attack by Romain Bardet. This is definitely a high pace by Vermarke, but this is not what I would qualify as a real punch, something that Bardet can do. So, Pogačar stays on the wheel, eventually the peloton catches up, and we're still in the same situation. DSM pacing and Bardet waiting. They quickly catch the guys in the front, as Kevin Vermarke, who seemed very strong today, takes the lead and pushes the pace still. But eventually, Vermarke is tired and DSM are just kinda done. Vermarke falls back as Maika comes to the front, and Maika here is not happy to say the least. It's hard to hear exactly what he's saying, but I'm pretty sure his last sentence is fucking Christ. Maika is of course not happy and perhaps not understanding what DSM is doing here, because now UAE is expected again to control the pace in the peloton here. Meanwhile, Gebre Kitsabier, who was in the earlier attack today, attacks again. And as the peloton falls completely flat, we see Steinhauser, who was also an earlier attacker today, attack as well. Eventually, the two leaders gather over a 1 minute 30 lead as Steinhauser breaks away solo. Ineos and to a lesser extent DSM still do a little bit of work at the front of the peloton, but the lead has already extended to 2 minutes 30 by now. And after this, we never see from Team DSM again. Eventually, Pogačar goes on his very well expected, but also very non-inspired attack. He drops everyone, but the gap to Steinhauser is already too big. The young German deservedly wins the stage as Bardet finishes 7th, which does nothing for him in the general classification. Another stage and another day full of wasted effort by a team for absolutely no result in the end. And I know we shouldn't just look at things from a result-based perspective, but if we look at the tactics here, they also make absolutely no sense. If you want the highest chance to win a stage in this Giro, you have to attack early. It's just as simple as that.